for this last hour, almost hour. I'm going to try to round us out and close the conversation here around my favorite topic, which is recruiting, retention, all things talent acquisition and strategy. I mentioned earlier, my name is Jesus. I'm the founder CEO of Vida Solutions. I just started my firm a few months ago after leaving the White House. I've been working in recruiting and talent acquisition for the last decade. And so uh, Again, what I want to focus on today is talent strategy. I'll also hit segments around like talent management, so retention, and just ways to keep our talent. Right? It's one thing to hire the talent. It's another thing to keep them. So next slide, please. So the first thing I did want to actually talk about was a key difference as to what I do versus what a lot of my partners and other people in the industry do. A lot of people when they hear Vida Talent Solution, they say, "Oh, I'm an HR consulting firm." Oh, so you're a staffing agency? I say, no, I'm not a staffing agency. I do staffing. I do recruiting. That is a service I provide, but that is not the bread and butter. But then they also say, well, are you a PEO? I said, no, I'm not. I'm also not a PEO. So PEOs, professional employee organizations, similar to like ADP, TriNet, JustWorks. Those are some examples of professional employee organizations. They handle like HR compliance, onboarding, a lot of the things that Morgan actually just talked about, right? They handle your infrastructure as an HR group, right? So what I really focus on is being a partner right next to you. So instead of having to hire a full-time HR person to do a lot of the things that you would have them do on site, I come in as a partner to you to do that. So really as what they call fractional consulting, right? So fractional HR, fractional, people support. There's the insert here, right? There's different ways you can iterate on that. And so that is my approach. My approach is to come in, either augment your team if you already have one. So if you have recruiters, if you have HR compliance specialists or generalists, my job is to help you fill in the gaps that maybe they're not covering, right? If you're a team that does not have HR, period, well, we need to talk about that, right? Like, what are you doing right now? Are you handling that? Can I take that over for you so that you can worry, to Morgan's point, worry about building your business and not having to focus on all the things related to HR? So why does this even matter? Why are we talking about this? What are some of the things that we're seeing? And so I grabbed a couple different metric points that multiple surveys have been ran by various different companies, Workday, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, and out of all those different metric points, these are some of the top ones that come to mind when we talk about why does this even matter. The first one is talent shortage. So the metric here indicates that 69% of SMBs find it difficult to locate qualified candidates and recruit them to their organizations. So, I mean, that has been a challenge since the dawn of time. There's always a lack of talent, specifically if you have different industries like technology, finance, you know, manufacturing. There's always a need to find more talent, right? And now with and I'm going to talk a lot about AI in this segment too. So get ready, stay strapped. Now with the changing landscape with AI, it's even becoming that much more important, right? To talk about finding good talent. The other thing is cost for turnover. I mean, turnover is probably any organization's biggest cost when it comes to people. Because you got to think about it like this: it's one thing to recruit somebody, right? So you're spending on the tools, you're spending on payroll, you're also spending on the time that your team has taken out of their day to interview, to onboard, to train somebody. And so for you to hire somebody and then 3 to 6 months later they leave, well, you just spent a lot of time and energy and money to bring that person on board just for them to move on to your competitor, right? And so this number really just indicates that that equates up to about 40% of people's salary, right? That's what you're paying, 40% of that person's salary for them to just go ahead and leave, right? And that's an average number. And then the last one, which is I think is the most mind-blowing one, and it's honestly no secret. If you just talk to your teams and you're hiring people, you'll know that this is true, and you probably felt it yourself as an employee at X, Y, and Z company. And this number indicates that 80% of people, or 80% of employees, felt that turnover increased their workload and lowers morale. I mean, that's just a fact, right? If I have a team of 5 people and one person leaves, Now 20% of that work is coming on to us, the rest of the 4 people that are there, right? And so that's a no-brainer. It happens everywhere we go. I mean, it even happened when we were in school, right? You had a team of 3 people on a project, and then this guy's slacking off. Now the 2 people got to present because this other person didn't do their part of the work. So yeah, that's fine. Before I hit on this slide, I mean, it's just really having you think about why are we even talking about hiring? Why does that matter? Now, a couple of things I wanted to talk about were some of the most common challenges that we see when it comes to recruiting and hiring and retention. The first one is not having a defined hiring process. So again, especially with small businesses, small to medium-sized businesses, a lot of them are handling this on their own. They're like, let me just wing it. I got the infrastructure in place, right? I got payroll, I got 401k, I got benefits, I got all these other things settled. I'm good. But then you start actually recruiting and sourcing and hiring. And you're like, oh man, like this is a lot harder than I thought, right? Like it's the challenge with developing a good hiring process is that you have to be able to create a repeatable process that you can scale as your company scales, right? Because it's going to change depending on the talent you're hiring. It's going to change depending on the number of employees that you have, and who knows where your business transforms from the point that you first started to. And so having a clear structure allows you to be able to attract candidates in a much faster way, right? So having a clear, concise process. The second thing is vague job roles. So how many times have you gone onto LinkedIn, a job board, and like you're applying for a job and you look at it and you're like, they're asking for like a unicorn, right? This is not even realistic. Like they have all these different requirements, all these different things, and so having good, clear descriptions from a candidate's perspective will allow you to have a much clearer sense of the types of candidates that you want, right? And then the last thing, which I think is one of the most important things, as a recruiter, this has always been a top of mind for me, is candidate experience. Candidate experience is by far, if you don't think about this, if you're just thinking, okay, well now I got this person, we're recruiting them, we're gonna give them an offer, but like their entire process was crappy, they're gonna talk about that. They're gonna probably come on as an employee like, man, Bob, like he didn't care about anything that I said. Like it was an okay interview process, and forget about if you don't hire that person, right? Now you're letting that person go back into the wild and talk about your company to everybody else, right? Oh, I just interviewed at X, Y, and Z place, and man, they treated me like crap. I went through 10 interviews and they didn't even give me feedback. Those type of things matter. People talk, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but that is a very important thing to think about is candidate experience. All right, so diving into talent acquisition strategy. So the way I like to talk about talent acquisition strategy is I like to divide it up in 3 different segments. The first being planning, right? So the talent planning. Where are you going to start, right? What types of skills do you need? What types of needs does your business have that you anticipate, right? You really have to think about those things and start mapping them out so that when you're ready to build out the job description and start recruiting, you know exactly the type of talent that you're looking for, and you're not stopping midway to then figure that out, and that impedes on your recruiting efforts. The second thing is sourcing. Now, it's a very common term in the recruiting space is sourcing, and that's really where are you going to find these people, right? Where are you going to start? What does the talent labor market look like? What does the demographics look like? What are the skills out there that are commonly known? And so devising a plan to build a pipeline is extremely important. Gone are the days where you could just post a job on Indeed and you get the right candidate. Let me just tell you that is not real anymore. So especially now with AI, I mean, let me just tell you, some of the things that I have seen are crazy, right? Like, I mean, there's fake candidates out there. That is a real thing. There's bots that just create applications. And I mean, think about it, right? If you're one HR person and you post a job and half of your applicants are fake, like, and you're going through those resumes, think about how much time you're killing, right? And don't even get me started on interviews. I have seen AI generated interviews, by the way, where they create an avatar and they're like going 15 minutes into the call and they're like, that's kind of weird, right? Like they like have the person stand up and it's like they can't stand up because it's an AI. So it's like some really scary stuff out there. And so I say all that to say that, sourcing is important. You can't just rely on posting a job and expecting to get the outcomes that you want. You really have to go find a way to get it, go out there and find it, and bring it to your organization. And then the last thing, I labeled it as structured interviews, but really this comes down to your process, right? So you found the candidate, you sourced them, you got them to apply, but now how are you vetting them, right? This goes back to what I mentioned about how are you even sussing out that they're an AI, right? How are you figuring out that they're not just going through the interview process and then when you actually hire them, they're a whole different person, right? So really not just doing technical interviews or behavioral-based interviews, but providing a comprehensive interview process that will allow you to actually vet that person and do it in a way that also gives them a good experience, right? Because you don't want to drag it out for 10 interviews or do a full day interview with somebody on the first stage. Like, why would you do that, right? Vet them, maybe give them a 30-minute call, maybe then an hour call, and then you bring them on site, right? So those 3 steps will typically give you a good starting point into developing a good talent strategy. Right, next slide. All right, so employer branding. I'm gonna massage this one in a little bit because I think it's extremely important, and I touched on it a little bit with candidate experience, and that's branding, right? I mean, anytime you talk about your organization, you're branding, and if your employer branding is not on point, that could be the deciding factor between a candidate deciding to come work for you or go work for your competitor, right? And so a couple of things to note here. First is, what type of story are you telling candidates, right? Do you have a mission-driven purpose? Do they align with that purpose? And are you messaging that out to the world, right? Do you have that on your LinkedIn page? Do you have that on your company page very clearly outlined? Are you having partners talk about you in a positive way? This leads to the second thing, is actually humanizing that branding, right? Telling your story. So as a company, it's about having your employees do the recruiting for you, right? If they're out posting videos of like, man, I love my company, we just were at an offsite and we did all these amazing things, people are like, that looks fun, I want to go work there, right? How do you think Google got to where it was, right? Like, they call themselves Googlers for a reason. Like, they have their own title. Like, it's crazy. And so it's all about building that culture, right? You want to set the right kind of tone, not just to the employees that you have in your business, but to the folks that are seeing your job postings and who want to come work for you. And then the last thing is, this is more of an internal thing, is having a cost-effective way of communicating internally. So how are your employees talking to each other? Are they using Slack? Are they using Microsoft Teams, right? It's about setting the right culture internally so that, again, there's a one, they want to come work, and 2, they're also taking that and saying, let me go talk to my neighbor next door. Hey man, I work for this company, I love it here, we get paid really well, we got really good benefits, right? Like, these are the things that people talk about on a daily basis. So you want to make sure you think about those things. Checking my time here. All right, next slide. All right, so we were going to talk about it, AI. And so this particular slide, I wanted to just do a high-level overview. I can probably do a whole hour workshop on just AI tools, but I'll start with some of the basics. The first thing is sourcing and applicant tracking systems. So ATS for short. So right now you can do the research yourself, but there's a bunch of tools out there that are really game-changing. What you used to be able to do with a 1,000-person organization, you can now do as a 1-person team, which is kind of crazy. And so, a lot of these tools like GemAI, Juicebox, Loxo, I know some of these are funny names, but they all have built-in AI into their systems that allow you to do predictive analytics. So think, for example, I post a job, I get 1,000 applicants. Tools like GemAI, for example, it'll take those 1,000 applicants and it'll actually give them a scorecard based off your job description. So it'll read all those resumes for you, and then it'll say, okay, well, based off your job description, the top 10% of these 1,000 applicants match your job description. So maybe you want to start here, right? So then you can just filter out that other 90%. So instead of looking at 1,000 resumes, now all you gotta do is look at 100, right? And then from there, I mean, there's a bunch of other features. I mean, I did a demo with them a few weeks ago, and you can even build out your own internal pipeline, right? So, if you have multiple jobs, right, it'll say, well, you have 10,000 previous applicants in your candidate pool. You just posted this new job. Well, out of that 10,000 that was already sitting in your candidate pool based off your company, here are like the top 5 or 10 people that actually match your new job description, which is crazy. Like, that's bananas. Because I'm like, if I could have done that 10 years ago, it would have saved me so much time. Like, I would have been able to find a candidate in days and not weeks. So that's one to think about is different sourcing and ATS tools. The next piece is transcription and documentation. This for me has been a game changer. So if I had this again 5 years ago, even, I mean, this would have saved me so much time. Like right now, I mean, transcription, there's a lot of tools out there. Otter, Fireflies, you name it. I use MetaView. MetaView is actually very specific to recruiting and HR professionals. What I like about it is that it can not just transcribes your call. So like for me, what's important is being able to talk to the candidate, right? I want to focus on having a 30-minute conversation with that candidate and looking them in the eyes or the camera and not having to go down on my screen, like, oh, let me take this notes real quick. And, it takes away from the authenticity of that conversation. And so with tools like MetaView, it'll transcribe the call. It'll then give me all the key insights. Hey, here are the top 5 topics you guys talked about in that call. And then it will also auto-generate a follow-up, right? So it'll say, well, here's the 5 things you talked about. Here's an email I already drafted for you as an AI. Just go ahead and send it. Or you can review it and tweak it and whatever. But that used to take, 3 hours? I had to look at my notes, make sure that they were all good and sound. Then I had to write a follow-up email, make sure it looked good, and then send it. That used to take an hour or 2, right? Per candidate. Now that could take minutes. And then the last thing is the interview and candidate experience. So there are tools out there right now that actually allow you to automate certain parts of this process. So whether that's, if you wanted to use AI to that degree, there are some tools and some companies that are actually building avatars, and like having them do the first screen so that the HR team can do more higher level functioning things. And some of these tools are very, moderately priced, even for small businesses. So it's just something to think about, something to get your brain, thinking in terms of, well, what parts of my process can I take and make my life easier so that I can focus on other things, especially if you're a small team, especially if you're doing it by yourself and you don't have any other HR person. This is at least a way to get you started. So I'll move on to the next one. All right. So I also had to talk about DI because I think it's extremely important. It's not just about what you hear on the news or what you're hearing, from a political standpoint. It really makes a key difference. And a lot of studies have indicated that, having diverse teams generates more revenue, right? So a couple of things to know, and I won't stay too much on this slide because I think we're running out of time here. One is, looking at your job description and making sure that it appeals to every audience, whether that's veterans or people with disabilities. It's not just about certain demographic groups. It's about looking at it from that standpoint and saying, how can I widen my talent pool, right? You don't want just 10 people, you want 100 people that are qualified for your job. The next thing is reaching out beyond the LinkedIns, the Indeeds. There's Discord channels now, there's Slack groups, and these are free. You could just join them. You just research online, like, maybe you want to hire more people with disabilities because your product is specific to the disability market. All right, well, let me look up groups that are specific to this, right? Let me post my jobs there. Why am I posting my job on Indeed and I'm gonna get 100, fake profiles, right? And then the other two, I'll just combine them real quick. But again, just having structured interviews and I'll keep hitting on this point, because if your process is repeatable and it's the same across every candidate, then on the backside, it also helps because you avoid any lawsuits because people think you discriminated against them. And also you're able, the likelihood of you finding a candidate that meets your requirements is a lot higher, right? Because every candidate has been assessed the same. There's no reason to say that one person deviated from the process than another, right? And then just tracking that, right? Metrics is important. The analytics is important. If we're posting our jobs here, are we getting a good return off of that, right? So understanding those metrics are super important. All right, next slide. All right, I think this is one of my last two slides. All right, so I talked all about recruiting in the first part, which is everything that happens from the point of you posting your job all the way up until you got an offer. But what happens after that, right? What happens once this person started, once they're here? How do we keep them? And so talent management, again, this is a topic that you could probably spend a whole hour on, but I'll just hit on a couple of points here. Number one is effective onboarding. So again, you can't just bring a person on board and just expect them to know things, right? Maybe you have a handbook, that's great. Maybe you have some other documents that they can do some things async, but it's much more than that. It's about really figuring out how do we get this person up to speed and productive as possible, right? Like get them on board and ramped up as quickly as possible. The second thing is regular check-ins. So this is a lot of the times where I feel like hiring managers and teams fail is the follow-up. Okay, this person's here, they've been here for a year, they're doing the job, but they've been talking to their coworkers like, this place sucks. Like my manager, he's terrible, yada, 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 right? But had you known that 3 months ago, then you probably could have stopped what maybe something happened in between that year that you probably could have stopped at the 3-month mark, right? Or through regular check-ins like weekly, bi-weeklies, monthlies, whatever that cadence is. It shouldn't always fall on the HR person either. This is a responsibility that HR has to design and then get out to the hiring managers so that they can have these conversations with their employees, right? Divvy up the work a little bit. And then the last path is progression. Nobody wants to stay stagnant, right? People want to grow. People want to find a place that they can feel like home. And so if they feel like you're investing in them, whether that's learning and development or you're, setting a trajectory for them to become, a manager, those things are super important in creating those pathways, performance management reviews. Again, all these things, we could talk about these for hours, but they're super important to think about. And those are, I would say, in my opinion, are the three main components of having a good talent management strategy. There's other things that you can dive into like analytics and learning and development. I talked about performance reviews, and those are all separate topics, but these I think are a good starting point. And what can you take away from all of what I just said? So obviously the first thing, if you haven't thought about, is map out your hiring process, right? If you think you've got it all figured out, I would say take another look and just say, okay, good. Can I take this step away, or can I add another step, or are we using the right tool, right? Like think about how can you make your process clean and sound and repeatable? Because if you leave, if you're the only HR person and you leave, can the next person then pick up whatever you left off, right? Do you have it documented? Second thing is curiosity adoption of AI. Morgan said it, it's not going anywhere. In fact, people are going to double down. They've even said, I think the CEO of Anthropic, which is if you guys are familiar with Claude, it's like the competitor to ChatGPT. He said that like 50% of low-level white-collar jobs are going to be eliminated by the end of next year. And so, it's going to transform the way we work. And, whether it's for good or for bad, right now I tend to be a little bit more of an optimist when it comes to AI. There's some scary stuff out there, but I think that the biggest thing to take away from that is that from a recruiting lens, from a HR lens, some people fear that, we'll lose our jobs, like people in HR, but some functions might, but I also argue that other functions will be optimized and augmented because of AI, right? In order to make our jobs a lot easier. I mentioned the resume example because like that's an easy one. Like the number of resumes that I've seen in my lifetime is probably enough for like a whole city, right? But with AI, like I no longer have to do that. I could just click here, 5 minutes later, it tells me the top 10 people I should be talking to, right? So adopt it, be curious, just think about ways that you can implement into your process. And then the last takeaway, if you haven't thought about this already, especially if you're onboarding people, whether it's contractors or full-time employees, have an onboarding checklist. What do they need to do in the first week, the first 2 weeks, the first 90 days? Figure out what that is. Use ChatGPT for it. Like, you know what I mean? There's different ways that you can spit something out now so that you have something prepared for future employees as you start onboarding. And I think that's it. So that's my contact, and we are 10 minutes shy. Thank you. So, yeah, we have 10 minutes left. Did anybody have any questions about anything?
What's your specialty for recruiting?
I do specifically tech recruiting.
Okay.
Yeah. But I've recruited finance, sales, marketing, legal, pretty much everything. Any questions about like any of the presentations? So USI, ADP,
R&D.
R&D.
I have a lot of questions, but I don't want to take up. I mean, I literally do questions. I'll go around.
Yeah, I'll sit down. We'll have a
Yeah.
open conversation.
So I'll start with ADP. The R&D credit, is that most